What's going on, my fellow Masketeers? Welcome back, welcome back. Yes, the wait is finally over. Happy New Year. And for the first video of the new year, I think it's only right that we talk about the live action version of Avatar, The Last Airbender, which is by far one of my favorite animated series of all time. So, with that being said, let's get into this. The new episodes dropped on Netflix, 8 episodes based off book one of the series. Now, how should I start this off? You know what? I'm going to start off by saying this is probably one of the best live adaptations of an animated series. Now, does that make it a perfect series? Absolutely not. But I will say that as a standalone, it's a decent, it's a decent adaptation. I do like the fact that when it came to trying to keep the essence of the original, they tried in some parts and they didn't do well in others. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. I'm not going to give you the premise of the show because at this point, you should know what this show's about. If you've never watched the original, shame on you. Straight shame on you. But if you have, then you don't need a recap. And just to tag on to my last statement, if you haven't watched Avatar The Last Airbender, go watch the original done by Nickelodeon. Absolute perfection. When I say perfection, I'm talking about perfection in terms of character, story, plot, pacing, and general themes. It has so many gems in that season, or should I say in that series. So many gems that you walk away taking something different depending on the age and the mental state that you're in, because that's how good of a show Avatar The Last Airbender is. And I'm referring to the original animated series, so you don't get confused. It deals with a lot of topics from friendship to coming of age to war to politics to ideologies, and it sprinkled a little bit of spirituality in there. So again, one amazing series. But let's get back to this live action. This is what I will say. I will say that the live action is a decent attempt. And the reason why I say it's one of the best adaptations is because there is not that much to pick from. Let's just keep it real. When it comes to live adaptations, they don't really do justice to the source material. And I'm talking to you, One Piece. That's right, I said it. I'm going a little bit left here. One Piece was not it for me. I'm an avid One Piece fan. I read the manga, I watch the anime. I'm sorry. The live action, I don't understand what the hype was about because to me, it was lacking. We won't even talk about Mexican Luffy, but we're going to leave it there. Anyway, I had to get that off my chest real quick. I am not a fan of One Piece. People are going to attack me in the comments. Have at it. That's my opinion. One Piece, I didn't get the hype. It wasn't all that, especially when it came to Luffy. Luffy to me was a letdown. Zoro and Sanji were the best part, in my honest opinion. But when it came to actually Luffy himself, he was dead. Even his fighting style was dead. This man only pulled off like one rubber attack per episode because they didn't have the budget for it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let me move past that. And his shoes were dead as well. I don't know what bread loaves he was wearing on his feet. Come on, man. If you ain't gonna give him the classic straw sandals, cool in it. But give him some kicks that at least make sense. Them shoes there were shambles. Okay, I'm done. Back to Avatar, The Last Airbender. Yeah. The series itself, like I said, it was good, but then I feel like it kind of fell flat. And the reason to me why it fell flat was they made changes that didn't actually make that much sense within the narrative that they're trying to weave. So with these episodes, they're an hour long, whereas the original is 30 minutes. And I felt like if you're going to make it longer, cool. But at the same time, give us something new that you're incorporating into the series. And I feel like with the hour that they gave us, it felt like they stripped things away, which was odd. And maybe it's because, again, there were less episodes. But when you think about it, because they were an hour each, technically, that's 16 episodes. That's 16 episodes. And I don't think that the original series had that many episodes. I think it might have no more than 24 episodes a season. So realistically, you could have cut the fat out and give us like the integral aspects of the series and then add a new thing to it. Speaking of new things, the one thing which I will say, which is high for me, is I like the way the series began. In them showing you what um started the whole war in terms of the attack that was done on the Southern Air Temple. Yo, let me say this. They made the Fire Nation a real threat. That is something which the show, the original show, didn't really do. Whereas in this series, it starts off with just pure flames, no pun intended. But that attack on the Air Temple, it was pure beautiful. It was a thing of beauty because they set up the Fire Nation as a real threat. And I'm telling you, I wasn't expecting to see these air nomads getting barbecued. And they were getting barbecued, char grilled, well done, crispy. And so it set the tone for me because, again, they showed that the Fire Nation is a real threat and they didn't come to play any games. They really came here to cook. And people cooked a lot. So I really like that. I like the fact that it sets off the tone of how the war started and also to show you that the Fire Nation is a real threat and they're really about this life. They keep the heat on them at all times. But as the show progresses, I felt that certain things dwindled along the way. And I would say that the biggest thing for me, which I didn't like, was certain characters. One being Zuko. Oh my God. Listen, the one thing which I loved about Zuko was Zuko, as you watch the original series, he starts off as a young man that has been scarred by his dad and he's trying to regain his honor. But because of that, he has a constant need to prove himself and he's always angry. But you see his anger conflicting with who does he want to be? And so he's trying to become something that he feels he has to in order to make his dad proud. And so that was always, in a sense, the similarities, but also the differences between him and Aang, because both of them carry a weight on their shoulders and they feel that they have to become something. Aang being the avatar and him having to fulfill his duty as the avatar. And what does that mean? And Zuko on the other end, who is the crown prince, and him wishing to regain his honor so he can become the next Fire Lord. And so both have got expectations placed on them, but it's how they navigate that. And whereas Aang is somebody that runs away from his responsibilities, Zuko is the exact opposite. He runs towards them, but so much so that he's obsessed with it. And there's an anger there because he can't fulfill it. Whereas Aang can fulfill it, but he's afraid of what it will cost him to fulfill it. So that was always a great dichotomy between Aang and Zuko. Whereas now, this Zuko he's a bitch, bro. He just whines. I don't get the intensity. Like even when he shows emotion, it doesn't feel like anger. It literally just feels like whining. And to me, that's really sad because again, Zuko's transformation is him finally letting go of his anger and him becoming the man that he chooses to be. Whereas here, I don't see the anger in him. I definitely see the conflict, but the conflict just seems like he's whiny. And that's not the case. He's not supposed to be whiny. He's literally just supposed to be driven, but his anger clouds his judgment. So once they butchered him, it never really sat with me. As well, I didn't like the actor. I can't lie to you. And it's so crazy because the one thing which this show did, they got good actors, but they put them in the wrong roles. because the actor that plays Jet in the live action, to me, he should have been Zuko because he looks like him and he's even got his range and his angle. There's like a scene between Jet and Katara. We're going to get to Katara in a second, but there's a scene with Jet and Katara, and like there's angle that he displays. Again, it's like coming to the surface, but it's controlled. And I thought, yo, this is Zuko. This is who's supposed to be it. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we find out that he auditioned for Zuko and he didn't get it, and then they liked him so much that they just gave him the character of Jet. But we move. Let's go to Katara. I cannot lie to you, Katara is a mixed bag for me. And I feel the reason why she's a mixed bag is because I feel like here they overly emphasize Katara. I'm sorry. They overly emphasized it. Like they really went for the girl boss all over again. But the funny thing is, they didn't even have to do that because Katara was always that chick. She's always been one person who is compassionate but also firm, and she stands on her beliefs. Whereas this version of her, it was too much. You could feel she was overemphasizing. And again, they put too much emphasis on her in the sense of she's like Aang's whole anchor. Like Sokka isn't really even needed, if I'm being honest. It's all Katara because Katara does everything. She can do everything. And at the same time, even though Katara was very gifted, and again, she was gifted in the original, here it's just taken up to a 10 to where you might think she's the Avatar at some points. I kid, but you get the point. I didn't really like her character too much. She has moments, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, nah, they were really doing too much. And again, you could tell that a lot of these modern feminist ideas were being pushed through her, and it just doesn't work for her character because she doesn't need that because she's a strong, independent woman, but at the same time, she's a caring and deep character. Whereas here, she's always given a speech. She don't even sound like a real person half the time. She's always given a speech where you're just like, all right, wrap it up. I'm tired. Let's move on to Sokka. Sokka, dead. Dead 100%. I didn't like the character whatsoever because he doesn't have the ability that they wanted him to have. You can tell that even how they writ him, they would copy and paste him from the original. But this actor doesn't have the range and the ability to make it feel natural. And that's something which, again, I was really sad about because even watching him, it felt like watching an imitation of Sokka. It didn't feel like this is who this character really is. And because of that, it kind of fell flat for me. Sokka was kind of wasted. And even when it came to some of his character traits and his interactions with people, nah, it wasn't really doing that much for me. A lot of Sokka's parts felt rushed. And there's a lot of rush parts in this, even in terms of how Aang doesn't go through any water training in this season, which is wild because, again, in the first season, he starts to learn waterbending. By the end of the season, he hasn't mastered it, but he's got a decent enough understanding and a grip on it to where he can actually waterbend. Whereas here, he doesn't do no waterbending consciously. Anytime he does do waterbending, it's either somebody else is using him, aka Avatar Kyoshi, or he's literally been turned into a vengeful spirit that's then used in water. But him himself, he never uses it, which is dumb because even in the original series, it's book 1, which is water, book 2, which is earth, and book 3, which is fire. So by book 2, he's now going to master earth. Whereas here, the season's ended and he ain't even mastered earth yet. I mean, he hasn't even mastered water. So in season 2, he's gonna have to go through mastering water and earth. So again, it just feels like they rushed that aspect. They didn't put enough time in developing that. And another thing as well, which I did not like, was Aang's character. I like the actor, by the way. I thought the actor was a good pick. I think he captures Aang. He's able to keep the playfulness, but also emote when he needs to. He don't emote that much, but he emotes enough to where he can carry the character. The problem with this Aang is they made him too dependent on the friends aspect. And don't get me wrong, Aang loves his friends, but Here, it's like he can't do nothing without them. And it's not a case of him having to learn that the avatar has to do things alone, that the avatar has to do this. It's always a case of where, oh, my friends, I can't do it without my friends. I can only do this with my friends. And it's like, no, that's not Aang's character. It's part of it, but it's not the sole thing. And I think the best part where you see that is with Aang's fight against Bumi. In the original, Bumi was trying to teach Aang a lesson. And don't get me wrong, even in this live action, he does teach Aang lessons. And I do like the fact of how they've shaped the lessons that he's been taught in the live action, because this Bumi is trying to show him that you have to make hard decisions. You have to be able to make sacrifices. That's what being the avatar is. And that's what it means to bear responsibility, which is very true. Whereas in the original, that wasn't so much the lesson he was trying to teach him. But in the original, when they have their fight, Aang displays his ability to adapt and to change, which Bumi wanted to see. He wanted to see that if he had the fire to do the fight, to fight, because that's what's going to happen. He's going to have that fire. And however he finds a way to win, good, as long as he has the will to win. Whereas in this one, it was a case of where he's trying to show him that you have to make hard choices. And rather than Aang actually having to make a choice, and I would have preferred it if Aang chose to say that he will find his way, but he will not sacrifice anybody, that the Avatar does the impossible. And that would have been a major stepping stone for Aang in his journey. But no, instead, Katara and Sokka make a decision where they end up saving Bumi, so where Aang doesn't have to choose. But again, it goes back to the whole friend thing. And again, that's not the case with Aang in certain aspects. Certain aspects have to be Aang just dealing with what it means to be the Avatar. So for that, it was dead. I didn't really like that too tough. It sounds like I'm really just hating on this show a lot, but I'm not. Like I said before, I'm just being critical of the things which I felt was lacking in the show. I'm gonna talk about some good things. I really liked I liked Fire Lord Ozai. Ozai in this, I really liked it. I also liked the dynamic which is created within his children, because the one thing about this Ozai, because we get to see him from the very beginning, whereas in the original, we didn't really see Ozai. You heard about him, but he didn't make an appearance until later on in the seasons. Whereas here, because he's from the beginning, this version of him, he's much more manipulative, which I like. He puts his children against each other to bring out the best in them. But the best is always to his own nefarious means, because he doesn't believe in weakness. And I like the fact that that's even demonstrated in Azula's character. I don't like all the aspects of this version of Azula, but I do like the fact that she has a real complex in trying to prove that she's the best, and it's never good enough. Like, her dad is constantly pushing her for more and using her weaknesses against her. So I like that aspect. I don't like the actress who they got to play Azula as well. She ain't it neither. Which is funny, because they had two actresses which I felt would have been a better suit to play Azula. And it was the actress that they got to play Suki. I thought she would have been a better Azula than who they got. Or if you didn't want to go with her, there's actually another actress who actually plays one of Azula's friends, Ty Lee. I felt she looked more like Azula than the actress who they got to play Azula. So again, it's a case of where they got good actors and actresses. They just put them in the wrong roles, because certain people didn't look the part and they didn't play the part well. That's my own personal opinion. I did like Uncle Iron though. Uncle Iron was it. He was vibey. And again, it's a different take on him, but he still keeps the essence of the character, which I like, but he gave us his own particular version, which I can't be mad at when it's done well. And that's the thing. I don't mind them making changes or giving us different versions, but the versions have to make sense and they have to add to the character. Whereas I feel a lot of time a lot of the changes which they did do, they didn't add to the characters. They kind of took away from the characters. So yeah. With that being said, with that being said, I will say that Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I will not lie. Towards the end, I kind of got bored of it, only because at a certain point, it just stopped being enjoyable. Only because it started going downhill, and that might be due to the fact that I'm basing it on the original. So when it's getting to certain key moments that are either missing or lacking, subconsciously, I'm like, that was actually done better in the original. So this is just kind of falling flat for me. Whereas maybe if I've never watched Avatar before, and this is my first time watching it, I just might think, oh, this is really good, this is really sick. But for me, because I've got a reference point, I sat there thinking to myself, okay, by episode 6, it started now just dragging for me, in the sense of a lot of things people started doing stopped making sense. And once it stops making sense, I kind of lost interest a little bit. The final fight, there wasn't even a final fight. That's how sad it was. But when it came to Aang becoming the vengeful spirit, that part looked sick. Let me not lie. That's another thing in closing. The visuals here are just up and down, because there's parts where the visuals look sick and amazing, and there's other parts where, yeah, this is looking like some PS3 graphics. One of the low tier was when Aang got angry and like he was floating in the air when he visits the air temple, and he discovers that all of his people have been annihilated, and he sees the skeleton of his boy from 100 years back, and he starts getting angry and he starts floating in the air. That was some bad CGI. I can't lie. And they had a lot of like close-ups of his face. Nah, they shouldn't have done that. They should have just kept that camera far back, because every time they zoomed in, he was looking like a Tekken cutscene from Tekken 4. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. But yeah, those are my thoughts and my opinions on the show. Let me know if you've watched it. If you have, what did you think about it? If not, tell me why. Like always, sound off in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. It's good to be back. And I will see you at the next masquerade. Peace.